Well, it looks like I'm back up on the microphone. So just let me know, Julie, if I'm coming through well at this point. Excellent. Sorry for that little glitch there. Let me go ahead and flip back over to the other screen. There I am. Well, excellent. What a privilege to be with all of you today. As I was getting ready to say, wish I could be in Ohio with all of you live, but I make a promise to my students to travel as little as possible, and we were just getting ready for a major exam coming up. So it was either give them a video, David, or reach you guys through online and for me to be there for them. And they're all pretty nervous about the exam. So thanks for your forbearance. Well, I'll not say much more about myself because I assume Julie said too many very kind things about me. But it is wonderful to be here. Please feel free to interact. Those of you who have your laptop computers and such, you have the opportunity to be able to interact and you can be able to share chat messages with me. And also, as we go back to the other screen here, you also have the ability to send me Twitter messages as well. So I'm keeping an eye on my Twitter message over here. You just need to put DM in front of @David and then send your message. So let's go ahead and start the presentation. Boy, I wish I was having breakfast with all of you. I can smell the bacon coming through the internet. Wow, let's go ahead. Why is it that I was really interested in getting involved with this? Most of you probably know I had a previous life working with supplemental instruction. And whenever I was involved in training workshops, I oftentimes would say something like, I wonder how I would teach differently if I had the chance to get back into the classroom full time. Well, I get to do that now, and it's a great privilege. I work at a wonderful place. I feel very privileged and honored to be here. One of the things that I know is that I need to be a partner in the academic support and enrichment process. There's too many of my colleagues that tell students to just go down the hall or go across the campus and go find a tutor. What I understand is that I need to embed the best practices of learning assistance and developmental education inside of my class. So something that we've been investigating here for the past probably 8 years or so is universal learning design. Now, this concept has a variety of ways that it's described. Sometimes they call it universal instructional design. Sometimes it's called universal design for instruction or universal design for learning. This happens to be the one that I like. And part of the reason why I like this is that these principles could be applied inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Well, where did all of this start at? Well, universal design was about taking down physical barriers on campus or inside of society to make places more physically accessible. And probably one of the most iconic of all of those would be curb cuts. We soon started to notice that everybody, it seemed like, was using curb cuts. It was an easier way to transverse across the street. And that was kind of the beginning point when people started thinking, well, why is it that we're providing some academic services for some students who have a documented, real, visible or invisible challenge? And is there a possibility we could expand those to more people? And that's what we're really trying to focus on is we're trying to embed best practices of developmental ed learning assistance inside the classroom. Why is it that we have accommodations just for a few? Well, because we're trying to make an even playing field. But why not extend those for everybody inside of the classroom? Today is a day about me sharing really briefly in the next 30 minutes what are practical things that I do inside of my history class. I'll talk a little more about it in just a moment. Well, these are design principles for universal learning design. We could probably spend 30 minutes just talking about the theory of universal learning design. I'm not going to do that because my mission for today is to share very practical examples of what I do to change my behavior in order to make a better learning environment for my students. But I just want you to know there is a very clear theory base that goes behind universal learning design, and if you end up looking at the expressions of the principles of universal learning design. They'll look just a little bit different if you're looking at universal instructional design and the other variations. So I'm really not a big fan of about reading through PowerPoint slides, and I forgot to say something else, and that is all of these slides are on a handout which you can download from my website, arendale.org. So sorry for those of you who are furiously maybe taking notes at the moment on a napkin. You can get all of this material will all be available online. In fact, I'll have a recording of this particular presentation online as well. So we'll say a little more about that at the end. So at the moment, let's go ahead and see. It looks like we only have a few people online, so I'm not going to do this one. If we would have had a whole bunch of people online, I would have asked the question, well, who's using Universal Learning Design now? And I'm just taking a look over here to see if anyone is tweeting me at the moment, and not this early in the morning. Not everybody does Twitter. Oddly enough, more and more of my students are starting to use Twitter to communicate with their friends, and they're kind of now become kind of anti-Facebook. I don't understand all the dynamics of all of that. But I understand that there's people already inside the room who are doing universal learning design, and I want to recognize that. Oh, very good. Have a hard time concerning what it is except for the visual issues. Thank you. And let's see if we can't make good sense out of that over the next couple of minutes through some of my practical examples. So let me go ahead and push forward here. The case studies, we have a 450-page book about universal learning design as we do it inside of our classes. And they're done in science, math, history courses, art classes. We use it in lots of different ways, and those links will all be up on the website, my website, by probably 2 hours from now. I just didn't quite get it all done last night. So our case study is me. I teach an introductory U.S. multicultural history course. I have 75 students in each section of my course. So I have a total of 150 students among two classes. This is a 4-credit-hour course, and it's pretty challenging. I intentionally don't use any tutors inside of my classroom because I'm trying to test out this model to see whether it really works or not. I don't feel like I can be talking with you guys today about you ought to do something unless I'm already experimenting with it then. So what are the different ways that I go and change my behavior and the way that I organize my class? Well, these are the different ones up here, and we're going to be breezing through these pretty quickly. But I just want you to see that I think that ULD really can be used in a variety of ways inside of the classroom. Some of them are pretty simple to do, other ones are a little more complex. So my goal today is to identify all the things that I kind of do within 30 minutes. There's actually, I think I counted up, there's 52 different things that I've done to my class. And by the way, that's taken me years before I've been able to get up to 52. But hopefully by the time we get to the end of 30 minutes, you might find one or two of these kind of interesting and you might want to implement. So the first thing is how do I get myself ready for the classroom? Well, some things that I do is that I need to know what my students know about learning technology, so I do surveys with them. I've learned not to make assumptions about what their skill levels are. Now, people of goodwill can disagree. I know that there's something, an expression called a millennial generation. I can't even say the word well. You have yet to be able to do that. Well, sometimes when people use that phrase, they say that, well, students intuitively know technology and it's pretty easy for them to pick up. Well, I don't know about your students. I know about my students here at the university, and they're smart kids, and they have a real learning curve that they're all going through. They're teaching one another how to be able to use the technologies. So that's a reality check. Another reality check is that I do a 10-minute interview with all 150 of my students. It takes a lot of time, but I get answers to these questions that are up here, and it helps me as I'm trying to customize the class once I understand them a little bit better. What are some of the lessons that I've learned? I'm not going to read all the items on all the PowerPoint slides. My students tell me that's really quite annoying, but I just want to hit a couple of these that are up here. And let me just hit the middle one, and that is engage students in co-creating their learning environment. And that's the reason why the students themselves are going to be part of establishing and creating academic support systems inside the class. I could do all these things, but I think it's a lot better if they're involved, because that means if they learn some skills, well, they're going to be able to do these in classes where I'm not around or they don't have tutors and such. We'll talk about a number of technologies. One of the things that you can do is go to my website down there, arendale.org/tutorials, and I've tried to identify and have links to a number of video tutorials that have been created by people much smarter than me on how to use some of these different technologies. Frankly, there's a real growth curve in using any of those. Now, once again, today is not just about technologies as part of ULD. It's just one example. One thing that is part of ULD is that how do you make information accessible before the class session even starts? So those of you who have course management systems like Blackboard, Moodle, Sakai, or whatever it is, you're probably already doing these things that are already up here. So that's not a terrible big surprise. I just try to make a point to make sure that all the material is available in a variety of mediums. So what I do is that I have both required audio files that people listen to, like speeches and such, as well as printed materials. And for the audio files, those are all transcribed. So people can either look at the transcripts or they can look at listen to the material. Because actually, some of my students say they prefer to listen versus to read. And for them, they're trying to maximize their time. So if they're standing at the bus stop or they're riding on the bus to and from their homes, well, they get an opportunity with these audio files to be able to enjoy that and be able to use that time. So let's go ahead. Oops, Julie had a comment here. What, David? I'll just stop here just for a moment and see if Julie had something else she wanted to communicate to me. Oh, okay. Let me go and make an adjustment for audio here. Here, I just went and turned it up. Oh, it's at ear in. Okay. In case you need for me to pause for a moment, you just let me know, Julie, and I'll do that. Okay. Accessibility of material during the class. Well, some of these aren't terribly surprising. Now, there's a real philosophy about what to do about PowerPoint slides. And this is a place where people can have people of goodwill can disagree. I give them pretty much the complete PowerPoint slide. Excuse me for a second. I was getting some feedback from something just through this other set of microphone or this other set of headphones on the floor. I go ahead and give them most of the PowerPoint slide. And the reason I do that is the students tell me that it's really hard for them to be listening to me while they're furiously scribbling down everything that's on the slides. And one of the things I've had to learn is that I have to take them where they're at, because I had the ability to do that. I had the ability to scribble notes as I was watching video clips. And with the students, oops, I'll stop for a moment. Oh, excellent point about why do I put the slides up in two formats. I wouldn't have known this until the students told me. Some students actually have PowerPoint installed on their laptops, and what they do is that they use the notes section, which a speaker normally would put material into. Well, that's where they type their notes about what I'm talking about on that particular slide. So I provided both as the native PowerPoint program. What I do as the file, what I do is that I don't include all the visual images or things that wouldn't really be things that you need to study for an exam, because we always use things to illustrate points sometimes. So that's the reason why I put it up both in the PowerPoint format, and then the PDF format means I put 3 slides on the left of the page, and on the right hand side they can scribble their notes then. So that's the reason why, and that's just simply an example of providing material ahead of time to make it easier for them to focus during the class on what we're talking about, because there's more going on a slide other than just the printed words that are on it. You notice also there's more verbal description of the images, and I learned that one after I had a student who had some visual challenges, and I was taught that what I need to do is to be more descriptive about the images, the maps, the photographs, or other images that are placed out on the screen. And the research shows that everybody else inside the room also gets it better in terms of what that particular visual image was trying to communicate then. And also, all the audio and videos are all captioned or are text translated. Fortunately, much of this material anymore that comes out is all captioned. So I automatically turn the reveal caption on for every single video that I show. And the research shows that everybody in the class benefits from that, not just simply those who have some difficulty discerning if there's an accent of the voice, or if they have some auditory issues. What are some other things? I make sure that I demo how to be able to use technology during class. So I take some class time. I actually make some video tutorials to make things more clear. I also use a microphone in my class, and the research has shown if you just raise your volume by 10 decibels, which isn't very much, students actually learn more. I've seen some documented research studies on that. And you might be thinking, well, if I'm in a room with 30 people or 40 people, why would I want to do that? I would encourage you to do it, because the students tell me that they hate it whenever instructors shout at them. Now, you may not think that you're doing that, but anytime you're raising your voice above conversation level, it doesn't sound the same to them as it does to you. I happen also to encourage them to use laptops and tablet computers inside the room, because that's where all of our readings are all located online. Am I worried about them being off task and Facebooking or something? And I'll normally say something on the first day of class. If you want to prepare for an early career at Walmart or Target, then go ahead and do that. Other than that, I simply say you're on your own. So I happen to follow the philosophy, let them have the technology in the room. This is another issue. This is a non-technology one here. I make sure that I'm constantly talking about the course syllabus, and I'm talking about the study guides and such in the class, because students take the wrong assumption that if I don't talk about something, it's not important. I find out that I have less questions about assignments if I are more intentional about the syllabus and refer to it on a weekly basis and send students to there. I still talk to them, but I try to get them to use other resources. These are the other things that students have taught me about technology. We're kind of sailing along on time here, but these are the things the students have told me, and I've modified my use of technology because of what they've told us. So once again, I'm going to flip some slides pretty quickly. If you would like, you can download the complete handout of all of the slides then. Accessibility of the material after class. Well, like today, I'm recording this particular session. I've got a software program that's called ScreenFlow. It costs about $80, and it picks up everything that's on the screen plus my voice. And originally I did that a couple years ago whenever we thought that there would be that very serious flu pandemic coming through the country, and we suspended all of our attendance policies, and we told students stay home if you're sick. We were to stay home if we were sick. However, we needed to record our lectures, and we needed to make those available for students. So the university bought a contract for a software program called Camtasia. Maybe some of you already do that. It didn't work as well for me. It's kind of a geeky thing. If you want to talk to me about it, give me a call on the telephone. But everything I do inside the class is all captured. I actually don't see any drop in attendance because of doing that. Part of it's because I also quiz inside of class, and we have in-class graded assignments. But I started to hear from students who are saying that, well, we're rewatching all of your lectures before the exams. And I said, really? And I said, why? Well, I remember one co-ed, students just tell you the truth. Sometimes it'd be better. They go, David, I thought I'd let you know. And I go, okay. It's okay. You can call me what you like. And then she said, I like it when you're gone. I went, oh, really? Tell me about that. And she said, well, then I get a video lecture. This is before I used to do this all the time. And she said, I like it because I get to control you. I can stop you, I can back you back up, and I more carefully can study what it is that you're talking about inside the class. And I went, wow, listen to the customer. And therefore, I always make sure to record all of these things. I use a course management system, which probably most of us all do. And as I said, online tutorials, I think, are pretty important. How do I get students ready for exams? Well, go to this particular webpage, myworldhistory.org. It is a co-constructed exam preparation site. I'd go to it in the middle of this presentation, but I'm a little worried that it'd take too much time. So I just want to give you the examples. On the very first day of class, I send out a survey to the students and say, would you like to be involved with our audio podcast, which is kind of like a recorded internet show. It's basically like you're basically recording conversations. And you could just post those up to your Moodle or your Blackboard site. For me, I'm a geek, so I go ahead and you can actually subscribe to my podcast through iTunes. So if you go to thenandnow.org, you actually will have a link that you can actually listen to the previous episodes that we've created, or you actually could go and subscribe for free to the entire podcast through iTunes. So the first item up there is 2/3 of the class volunteers to create vocabulary definitions or to create outlines, very sophisticated outlines of the potential essay questions. And you go, well, why would you go and do that, David? It seems like you're making life easier. Well, part of my reason is that not everybody inside the class gets a chance to form a study group with someone else for a variety of reasons. So I want to make sure everyone has material available for them to help them to do better on exams. Now, my expectations are pretty high for those essay questions. On my exams, you have vocabulary matching, you have a really difficult set of multiple choice questions, and then you have essay questions. And the students don't know which ones are going to be selected for the exam. But I go ahead and have 2/3 of the class volunteers to do something with that, and then about 1/3 of the class, they volunteer to do something with the course podcast. So once again, they're all helping one another. I also have online review sessions, and there's a free service that you could use. It's called justin.tv, and in 30 seconds, you could register, have an account, and you can actually be online communicating, kind of a very inexpensive version of what you see here. It has a chat room in which they're able to chat with you. It's not the greatest pedagogy, I'll have to admit, but students find it useful. Something else I do is that I take all of my slides that are shown during the PowerPoint presentations and I turn them into historic music videos. And I'll show you a company which can provide you free access to something that's like that. So once again, we're preparing the students for the exams through these, and we already talked about recording all the class lectures. I make sure that all the scoring rubrics on how I'm going to evaluate them for their homework assignments and the essay questions, those are all available online. In fact, I go ahead and take the rubric, which is, I think it's kind of detailed, and I actually print it inside of the examination booklet so that they know exactly what it is that I'm going to be judging them by. I think that that's another example of universal learning design. You're making material available for everybody inside the class to assist them to do their very best. And I think that that's what partially that does. Let me keep rolling along here, and then Julie will tell me whenever we're done then. What are some other things we do? Well, I do. These are things that you probably do as well. Sometimes I mark up a couple of pages out of a reading to show them what I get that's really important. I end up giving quizzes in class. I try to give them low stakes feedback. And that's really kind of something I learned from supplemental instruction. Those of you familiar with SI, the informal quiz is probably one of the most popular and sometimes overused activities in SI. Well, that would be an example of that. I actually do some online review sessions. So if you go to justin.tv/Arendale, I think that you'll see a previous video clip that I created. But once again, whenever I do this now with the students, I go ahead and I use this Adobe Connect software system to communicate. And they express that they find that very helpful. I also do virtual office hours with students. You know, sometimes they just won't come in. So now I have succumbed. I actually permit them to text chat with me. And also I'm available to do Google video chat. We sold our soul to Google a couple years ago. So we have a free suite of all of the like Google email and calendar and Drive and all those other things. In fact, that's how our website is created. It's actually created through Google Sites. It's not a real complicated kind of software program. And if you do anything with Google Sites, it isn't some super attractive website. But the thing that the students say is that we don't care about the frills and the whistles. We want to know what is the meat of the content, and that's what they want. It's kind of like the reason why students like YouTube. It's authentic. It's real. It doesn't have to be refined. This is kind of an odd thing that I do, and I will put a link to one of these lecture rewind things up on my website. For time reason, I'm going to kind of buzz by it. It's probably not one of the most important things that I do, but comes from a former background. Was in college a radio station DJ, so I kind of like visual images and music and stuff. And students kind of view it as kind of another reminder of things that we were doing inside of the class. We've got just a couple more minutes here left. Let me give you a couple of things that I'm doing to help generate more feedback for my students. One of them is a simple one. It's actually, those of you who are familiar with supplemental instruction, it is the post-exam survey, if you're familiar with that. And I'll put another link to that on the website page as well. And when the students go and they identify what are 25 things they did or did not do before the exam or on the exam. And the only thing I ask them to do is identify, did you get an A or a B, or did you get a C or below? And then what I do is that I crunch the numbers, and then I report back to the students, what did the A, B students do versus the students who did C or below? And the students like that because I'm not preaching at them about what they ought to do. They find out what their fellow students do. This has really been a great piece of simple technology that I think helps me to give more feedback for more of my students, and that is I use Dragon Speak, which is voice to text. So it allows me to be able to give more feedback to the students, because what I do is I use a course management system. We use Moodle at this particular campus, and I'm able to put the cursor inside of the computer cursor inside of the feedback box, and then I just speak my comments back to them, and I find that I can generate 4 or 5 times as much content than if I was sitting there typing it. And I make a deal with my students. I tell them, well, there's going to be a few typos inside of this, but there's 150 of you guys, and either you can get more content with some typos, or you can get one sentence that's perfect. And they always vote for give us more content. You also could do something called Vimeo, some of you might do, and it allows you to do a video memo. But that's probably a little more work than I want to do, frankly. How is it that we demonstrate mastery? That's part of universal learning design, too, is realizing that you don't have to make everyone do multiple choice exams. Now, you guys are probably far beyond that, and you do other kinds of things. But I work at a place to where people have got big classes. The biggest psychology class on campus is 900. I mean, that's like twice the size of my first community college, for goodness sakes. So They use standardized kind of bubble in kinds of exams. What I've learned is that through universal learning design is that there's a variety of ways that you can demonstrate mastery of what it is you've learned. And what you see up here is kind of a number of examples of those. I do little short papers. I have different kinds of formats for the exam. We just got finished doing a full day simulation on the Yalta conference where they took on the roles of different countries. That's generally rated the highest learning activity that they like during the class. Let me just note the second to the bottom down there. I intentionally design all of my exams. I have 2-hour classes. I meet twice a week for 2 hours, so we meet 4 hours each week. What I do is that for the exam, I do my very best to scale the exam so that most students can complete the exam in an hour and a half. So everybody inside of the room gets a little bit of breathing room. Now, do some students actually stay all the way to the end? They do. But a number of students, they feel quite satisfied that they comfortably finish. It's another design element of, some students get a documented need, therefore they can get time and a half or 2 times in order to complete exams. Well, why not just simply extend that for everyone in the class? Now, some of you may say, well, David, I disagree for X, Y, and Z, and I respect that. It's what I do. That's all I can really say, and because I just don't think that exams should be sprints to the finish. So I'll quit my little sermonizing and move on. What I've tried to do is that I've tried to rebalance my class. It used to be majorly based off the major exams. It's still not perfect yet. It's still 2/3 of the points still do come from the exams, but I'm growing the other portion. I'm trying to find more ways to meaningfully assess students in alternative ways. And I think that's also part of universal learning design. I know we just have a couple of minutes here left, so let's make sure I get this one in. Whenever you're doing universal learning design, things take longer. I mean, it's pretty efficient just to stand up in front and lecture. What I find out is that one of the elements of universal learning design is that what is the most critical things that you're doing inside your class? I mean, be really tough on yourself. What is your student learning objectives? And how can you maybe cut back a little bit on the flow of content? I mean, I used to be a history teacher that thought that the last class period I needed to speed talk. Those of you who are old enough, like the guy on Federal Express who could say like 300 words a minute. And that was a horrible way to end up a course, I thought. That I was just trying to fire hose them with content. Because in a history course, there's an endless amount of material to share. What I've had to do now is I've had to reevaluate, well, what is the most meaningful student learning outcomes? I slow down more. I do more interaction inside of the class. I'm making the class more accessible to learning. And that's really kind of a tough lesson that I've been going through because that wasn't the way I was taught. It wasn't the way I initially started off teaching. And now as I'm doing this, it's a very humbling process because I think about what I could have done. But you can't live with guilt. You just have to get better. And students are reporting that they're more satisfied. Let me just skip by a couple of these items here. How do you get from here to there? I'll have a link to this particular downloadable book. It's like 450 pages. So there's lots of wonderful case studies, practically how people have done universal learning design. And there is a chapter in here with my colleague David Gear and myself talking in more detail, much more systematically than I did today, on how it is that we're making our introductory history courses more accessible for our students. We're not permitted to do developmental level courses at the University of Minnesota. We could talk about all the politics about all of that. We still have students with needs. So how is it that we can make a difference? Well, we're trying to systemically change what happens inside the classroom. We still need tutoring programs. We still need developmental level courses. But we're doing what we can do to help make students more successful. And I guess this would be kind of maybe the place for us maybe to stop, if it's okay with you, Julie, is time for me to quit talking and for you to maybe talk with a colleague right next to you. What are 2 new ideas that you were just exposed to that you might want to experiment with? And maybe that's really kind of a good place. Or if Julie, if you want me to do some question and answer, I know you have a very tight schedule for the day. I'm happy to hang out, or if we need to move forward. Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and move to this other screen. And either Julie or I think we've got a Jeff out there who's also online. Looks like we've got a, sorry, my eyes aren't quite as perfect. We've got a Jensen. What is that? Oh, well, there's somebody else there. Sorry, my computer screen, everything is about one size. It's really tiny. So let's go ahead and type some questions, and I'd be delighted to do some Q&A with you. Now I'll promise to keep my answers short. Oh, does everyone agree? Let's say, like, does everyone completely understand the theory base and perfectly follow those 7 principles? Probably not. There's part of, I think, universal learning design is partially art as well as science. I do think that the principles do guide you, and we're pretty lucky at this place. We all had a federal grant to help fund us train ourselves. And some of you may be out here, maybe participated in that grant program because we had people from across the United States, part of our team, that helped to develop a practical application of universal learning design. So I think that we all have a general understanding of the principles. Now, the way it is expressed in different classes does look different. I don't think most people quite do the tech kind of stuff the way that I do it. I mean, I'm kind of a geek, so that's the reason why I do that stuff. And it really is kind of time consuming to do some of it, but I enjoy it, you know. Sometimes you cheat yourself on some of your research time, but part of this is my research. So not everybody completely agrees. And also, if you looked at universal instructional design, they might have a slightly different point of view. But I think the key concept is, rather than doing an accommodation for just a few students, can you figure out a way to take that accommodation and make it available for everyone in the class? That is a fundamental concept of universal learning design, is make available and take down as many barriers as you can inside of the class, visible and invisible. Once again, I'll be putting lots of material up on the web links. Well, absolutely. Regardless of what colleges say, they need, particularly at the 4-year institutions, I'm just horrified to see what's going on. And I think about the price the country is going to pay and about a lost generation of students that are being disadvantaged. I could go on about that, but your point is completely well taken. What happens to the students that don't have the developmental support? Well, at our institution, they've raised the requirements in order to be able to get in and are wanting them to go to community colleges. Well, the problem with that, and I started off my first 10 years were at community colleges. Community colleges are already full, and they don't have the ability to offer more sections of developmental level courses. I mean, I could talk about that for a long time. And I think that's part of what the battle you see going on with this college completion agenda people and what you see Hunter Boylan and others fighting for in terms of the national dialogue on how we need to not do this thing. I mean, if you have ever taken a look at any of my work on the history of developmental education, we've always had developmental level courses at four-year institutions. Always. In fact, you know who the first institution was to offer a developmental level class? It was Harvard. It's Harvard. They still offer developmental classes in writing and in reading and in study skills. Now, it may be that the developmental level writing students at Harvard would have been the honor students at my first community college, but everybody has the need. It's just that some institutions rename things and they find ways to be able to lower their profile so they can continue to offer them. So my concern is about students. It's the same thing as the national debate about what's going to happen to TRIO programs. I mean, that's the reason why people are really nervous, regardless of who gets elected president here in a couple of weeks. We've got this gigantic budget issue sitting in front of us. And I talked to a couple of my TRIO colleagues. We sponsor 3 TRIO programs out of our college, SSS, Upward Bound, and McNair, and they're already preparing for the sequester massive budget cut for them. So there's a lot of things that are going on that concerns me. And it's kind of easy to get kind of down whenever you see all those things happening. And the way I kind of deal with it is, what can I do to make a difference inside of my classroom? I'm not perfect. I'm still experimenting, but I'm doing what I can do within my level of scope of control. I mean, it kind of goes back to Stephen Covey, who, if you didn't know, passed away earlier this summer from a bicycle accident, of all things. And he talked about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. And I have a big circle of concern about the United States, but I do have a circle of influence where I get a chance to make a difference. And I know that for me as a college instructor, I got to do something to take care of my students. And this is kind of the way that I approach it then. So thanks for your question there, Julie. I don't have a lot of great answers other than I'm doing what I can do personally to have an impact with my 150 students. Are you telling them to applaud, or are they applauding? You're very kind, Julie. And once again, if you go, let me take you back to my first, oops, let's not do that. Let's go back to here. Promise this is 60 seconds and I'll be done. There we go. Oops. Let's do... There. Once again, if you'll go to my website within the next hour at arendale.org, you'll see web links to more documents and other resources. You've got my email address and you got my phone number, so let's continue the conversation. And I'll thank you all, and I'm going to sign off at this point, and you guys have a wonderful day at the conference. And Godspeed, and I hope to see some of you at the NAID conference in spring, perhaps.